Hey everybody, today I'm answering another question and I don't know how to pronounce this person's Twitter name, so I'm just going to put it below. But this person asks, I read an interesting discussion on YouTube about style over substance, or the other way around, in movies. What's your point of view concerning style versus substance in movies, and what showcases that best, do you think? That's a really good question. I think an easy argument could be made for either or, but nothing is easy with me, so I want to try to bring out the gray areas in that argument. If I had to choose, I would have to choose substance over style, just because I find for me, I get a lot more out of those kinds of films, the ones with ideas that keep you pondering them for a long time. And that's the kind of thing that I find myself being able to be stimulated by and returning to it over and over and over again. But that's not to say that I don't love style, because I do. I'm a very visual person and I love when people have a personal visual aesthetic. And I think that it's something that I really admire and envy a lot of times. I mean, I see a lot of auteur directors and I love the way that they see the world, from their point of view, and they can just filter it through their own creativity and imagination. And plus film, I think above anything else, is a visual medium, and that's what it had to start out being before we even got to sound, before sound even entered the picture. Pun. But yeah, I mean, I watch a lot of silent films and I find the imagery in it very powerful, and they're able to do that without any dialogue, and that is an incredible thing. Films that I love that are style over substance would be, and I know I say this all the time, but I can't help it. It's a good example. An American in Paris, or just any 1940s, 50s Technicolor MGM movie. I love musicals. Those are just kind of my, I guess you could say, guilty pleasures. I just don't feel guilty about them. But, I mean, they're much more, usually the plots of those films are throwaways, but I could watch them over and over again because the stars, whether it's Fred Astaire or, whoever, they have this charisma, and they really put so much effort into the look of it, the spectacle of the musical numbers and the choreography. And that's just something that I personally find very powerful and moving. I love it. And American in Paris is actually, I think, has much more substance than a lot of the other films that Gene Kelly made, but it is still very much about the visual look and everything. It's just, when we think about that film, we don't think so much about the characters, even though I think some of them are strong, not all, but some of them. We think about the music and the choreography and that amazing Vincent Minnelli look of the, just the color and the paintings and Gene Kelly and everything. That's what we remember. So that's, I think, a great example. My personal favorite example, though, this is not even a movie, it's a television show. Now, they did make a movie, but I'm not counting that. I'm talking about the show in particular. I honestly think that the best example of a show, or whatever, I should just say an artistic piece that was able to make style over substance work perfectly is Cowboy Bebop. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's an anime, it's 26 episodes, it is fantastic. One of my favorite shows. It has, in terms of just the look of it and the music, it's amazing. It is so innovative, so creative, and the detail that they put into every image, every shot of the show is incredible. It is so cinematic, unlike anything you've ever seen before. It's like they took from every genre of film or whatever, and they made it into this really great pastiche, but they didn't do it where it was so beat for beat trying to copy something. It was more like they were inspired by it, which I absolutely love. Now, the actual show itself and the story and the characters, I don't think are as strong as the look of it and the music of the show. But that is not to say that they aren't interesting. But as I watched it on multiple viewings, I realized there is a lot going on there, and there are some very profound moments, and the show really is about how life and death kind of match together and how we can contemplate the two, which is really interesting. And I think they are able to convey that beautifully through the imagery of it. But it is still a style over substance show. But there are those directors that for me just overindulge, and I know that's a really redundant what I just said, but I mean that they are people that indulge and then they even overdo that. And those would be people like Tim Burton. Now, not always with Tim Burton. I do like a lot of his movies. I love Ed Wood and Sweeney Todd and films like that, but let's face it, he is much more a visual director, and that's fine. I love his look. But I think the older I get, the less I find myself returning to most of his work. And then there are just directors that I flat out do not like. Zack Snyder would be one. As I said before, Baz Luhrmann. And for the most part, I know I'm gonna get killed for this, but Darren Aronofsky. The example I want to use for when style over substance does not work would be Requiem for a Dream. I have been asked to review Requiem for a Dream more than any other film, I think. I get a lot of requests for that. I don't really know why, but the reason I haven't reviewed it is just because I don't want to sit through it. I do not want to put myself through all that pain and suffering, because even if you think Requiem for a Dream is the greatest movie of all time, let's admit it is not easy to watch multiple times. And when I like to review something, I like to give you my fresh take on it, and I haven't seen that movie in years, and so I just don't want to do it. It is so gut-wrenching, and it is just, I mean, it is like a visual nightmare just from beginning to end, just going out of control until the end. The first time I saw it, I think I was about 18, and I was blown away by it. I was blown away by the way that the camera and the sound and the music and everything combined to be able to create such viscera on such a level that I had never felt before. And I was speechless when it was over. I couldn't fathom how Darren Aronofsky and his creative team were able to do that. Then I watched it again, and it was really strange watching it again, because I found myself being very underwhelmed by it. And I think the reason why is because the movie is so much about the viscera that he kind of forgot to pay attention to the actual characters. To me, they're much more kind of archetypes. They stand for archetypes rather than having, fully fleshed out personalities and ideas. With the exception of Sarah Goldfarb, I think she's a very interesting character, very sympathetic, but the rest of it, I just don't feel. And that's my problem with Darren Aronofsky in general. I mean, I had the same problem with Black Swan and other films of his. I feel like he's so much about like, oh, look what I can do with the camera, rather than creating the characters. I did love The Fountain, however, but I think if we could be ideal here, I think we would all probably, or at least I would like to see a director with an amazing visual style and amazing substance and bring the two together harmoniously. That's what I love. And we're lucky. We have countless artists and creative teams, directors that are able to do just that. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking Orson Welles, just because he's one of my favorites, Stanley Kubrick, Michael Powell, Emmerich Pressburger, Antonioni, Carl Dreyer, and if I want to be more current, I could say, Terry Gilliam, Lars von Trier, David Lynch, Paul Thomas Anderson, and the list just goes on and on and on. Some people, though, I'll use Orson Welles as my example, some people have issue with him and think that he is more style over substance, and I totally disagree with that. I think people that have problems with Citizen Kane, they always say, oh, well, it's much more about the technical bravura rather than the emotion, and I can see where they're coming from, but for me, the more that I watch it, the more I realize there's so much underneath it. It's just that everything that you see in his films is so visually arresting that you kind of forget that there's an actual story, which is why you've got to watch it multiple times. I think it was Peter Bogdanovich who said he had to watch Touch of Evil, which is another Orson Welles film. He had to watch it 5 times before he even noticed the plot. And it's not that the plot's not there, it's just, again, his look was so innovative and unlike anything anyone had ever seen before, and even by today's standards, you just look at it and you just marvel at what he was able to achieve. But if you watch it multiple times, you realize there's so much in those characters, and that's why I think people return to his work so often. So yeah, and I just like movies that you can return to over and over and can always find something special and something different that you never saw before, and that is Orson Welles in a nutshell. But yeah, so if I had to choose, I would choose substance over style, but I like it when you can combine the two. That is my ideal. That is my answer. Thank you so much for the question. If anyone has any other questions, maybe I'll answer it sometime. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, the link is below for that, and you can also like my Facebook page, the link below that. Catch you next time.